Ciao a tutti, bentornati sulla Pomp. L'intervista di oggi è stata realizzata il 13 di marzo al Jazz Club di Ferrara. Colgo l'occasione per ringraziare tutto lo staff che ci ha permesso di realizzare questo piccolo contenuto che per noi è estremamente importante, in quanto il chitarrista intervistato è uno dei massimi esponenti della chitarra jazz. Lui si chiama Jonathan Kreisberg e ci ha deliziato in quella serata con un concerto veramente memorabile. Buona visione a tutti, a presto.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Um, like for me, I think I love I love so much classic guitar things like Joe Pass and Wes Montgomery and all these guys. But the truth is, when I first was playing, I mostly was into I started and I was playing some classical guitar, and I liked a lot of like jazz piano, and classical piano and stuff like that. So, but as far as solo guitar, my first influence was probably like two guys like Ted Green and Tuck Andrus. Okay. Yeah, I mean those guys are killers. And I love Joe Pass, but Joe Pass is a different style. He's more like free in a way. What I really like is when Joe plays with Ella, yes. The duos with Ella. You know what I mean? Because I like having a little more of a solid kind of tempo and bass line and stuff like that. So I'm trying to do more polyrhythmic things. I love what Joe Pass plays, the way he plays. And just like I love the way Wes plays. But it's funny, Wes wasn't like one of my early influences. Actually, I mean, I love him now, but early on, probably wasn't one of my big influences. So that's probably why when people hear me, they go, "Oh, he doesn't sound like a standard jazz guitar player." You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because Wes was a genius, but he wasn't like my primary influence. I was checking out, Wayne Shorter and Joe Henderson and Coltrane and Keith Jarrett and Bill Evans, and trying to find a way to apply that to the guitar. Whereas from guitar, it was a very wide range of, classical, flamenco, rock. I was into guys like Van Halen and Steve Vai and Stevie Ray Vaughan. I like the way they treated the guitar. You know what I mean? Not necessarily. I don't call them jazz players. You know what I mean? But I did like the open-minded view of the sounds that you could get from the guitar. My dad listened to the Who. My first concert was the Police Synchronicity.
Really?
So it's like that kind of stuff had influence on me too.
Just today. Incredible.
Oh, well, you could probably hear, if you listen, you'll hear those influences. You know what I mean? But yeah, composition. Wayne Shorter and Coltrane and then eventually it was guys like Holdsworth and Schofield and Matheny. Matheny was obviously a huge influence. Like everybody at that time. You know what I mean? It's funny. It was so pervasive that sometimes we don't even mention Matheny, but actually, he's one of those guys who altered, the future of guitar. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
Starting from.
Wow.
This
Well,
album,
well, on that album,
is a little masterpiece.
that's my old trio. Yeah, that's.
Very young experience.
I use that album a lot for young students because I was really young on that album, 19 or 20, and I call that like the chameleon phase. Like there's a phase, not everybody goes through it, but I know I have some other buddies that went through phases like that where you're kind of mimicking, in a way, and maybe you don't even know you're doing it. But at that age, when I did that record, I had almost already gone through my Matheny thing, and I was so you can hear like the Someday My Prince Will Come. You could hear that Matheny influence on that album. But then the first track sounds like me doing my Holdsworth. Second track's like me doing my kind of Schofield. The third is like me doing my Bill Frisell, and then me doing my Jim Hall. You know what I mean?
Just see Scott Henderson with muscles.
Well, Scott Henderson, he's got plenty of muscles, but yeah, he was a big influence too. So all those guys kind of come out through my prism at that point, right? And then when I moved to New York was when I realized, because that was before I even moved to New York yet. When I moved to New York, I think I realized that I had to go deeper into the jazz. You can kind of you can learn the surface of a lot of kinds of music, but if you're going to play jazz, you have to go way below the surface and you have to live it for a while. So I got rid of like all these things, and I just was plugging straight into the effect. I mean the amp, playing standards gigs 6 nights a week, and studying everything from Tristano to Wayne to Jim Hall and Keith and all these guys during the day, and I just did that for like 4 or 5 years, and then I did trioing, which was purposely not with all those sounds, and it was stripped down. It was a trio, still a little progressive in a way, but not as much as the next couple records. Then I started trying to put all that back together, and that's when I did Unearth and South of Everywhere and those records. Yeah, I mean, this guitar is like, compared to some guitars, is not so acoustic. You know, when I record a solo album, like you're talking about, like the solo album, I actually do put a mic on the guitar because I like a little of the acoustic sound. But when you play like this with a band that's really hitting, actually, I was just saying to someone, we did a duo song on the end. I wish I had a mic on the guitar because when I play duo with Nelson Veras, I use the amps, but I always have a condenser because it's the acoustic sound. You can't, when you're playing without drums, it really adds kind of texture and percussion and communication, like rhythmically between you and the other person when they hear your pick hitting the string. You know what I mean? So that it was actually difficult for me, that duo. Like normally, I think I might even have one set up on the side in case we do that because it really helps. Sometimes when I was younger, I practiced a lot acoustic because I lived in an apartment where I couldn't play late, so I had to play. you know. But with now if I'm gonna practice, I almost always turn the amp on because I realized at one point that you can over pick. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
and if you play light and you should practice the way you play. So if you use that kind of a sound, you should kind of practice close to so it gets you used to that. What I don't do is I don't practice with distortion a lot. So every once in a while I do, but that's almost like going too far the other way. 'Cause it makes everything easier.
Yes.
Um, so, yeah. But no, I mean, these days, the only time I probably practice acoustic is if I'm watching a movie and I need to move my hands and I just do this, you know, which is yeah.
Last question.
Yeah.
When you play linear, you
Yeah.
just think any time on the harmony, or you play freely?
That's a great question. Both. Yeah, both. No, definitely, for sure. I love this one quote that I don't even know who said this quote, but I think it's a great quote. Probably can apply it to many things in the world, but you have to learn the rules before you break them. That's my philosophy, for sure. What I mean?
Example.
Yeah, I mean exactly. It's like you have to know. You understand the harmony, you understand the lines, and you understand downbeats and how to play chord tones in your lines to control the harmony. And then you can distort it by changing the harmony with your lines, or you can ignore it and freeform. And that's usually all done in some kind of, not the frontal part, but at some point it's a decision, and you hear it too. You practice hearing those things. But I do a lot of, I have this new teaching program called Explorations of Note that we were talking about, and actually that subject is huge there. We do a lot of linear work where we're working on the rules and how to really nail them, and then also working on techniques that are more advanced where you expand the harmony, and then other ones where you leave the harmony using shapes. There's a lot of ways to do that. I have something called the interval matrix that I teach, which is using multiple combinations of intervals that stretch out of the harmony, and you learn how to weave back. I learned a lot, not that specific thing, but the concept a lot from Brecker. I got to play a few things with him, and one day I asked him, it was like a sound check, and I had a perfect chance where he played something, and right after he played it, I said, Mike, what was that? Mike Brecker, yeah. And he was such a sweet, and intelligent, and giving person. So his answer it stuck in my head forever. It was so perfect. He said, he wasn't talking about these specific things. He said, a lot of times what I do is I practice these shapes, and many times the shapes are not necessarily harmonic based. So when I'm playing, I'll hear the shape, and he said, and a lot of times it will lead me out of the harmony. And this was the part that I really liked. He said, then I'll use a combination of my ear and my intellect to weave back into the harmony. I thought that was like perfect. You know, it's kind of obvious, but the way he says it, and when you're like, I was an 18-year-old kid, you know, when you say it, you go, wow, bing, you know, because I already kind of saw that in Train and different players that did that. But the way Mike said it was just perfect, you know. So that's kind of, I've since then always tried to find a way to do that, a system, you know. Yeah. Great talking to you guys. Come over to Explorations of Note. Check it out, you know.
Yeah. Really, thank you. It was a
Yeah.
privilege.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Just a few minutes. The first question is regards your soul playing, in particular one record.
But you don't have a mic on.
No, because on the editing we just.
Oh, you're gonna be
cut
so
it off.
so later. You're gonna put new voice. You mean?
Yes.
Uh,
Another.
So later he's gonna be like, "Tell me about your solo play," and then I'll be like, "Well, I like solo." You know, my voice will be all fucked up. He's gonna be like close to the mic with reverb. Yeah. James Earl Jones. Okay.
So the question is.
But you have to ask the questions very high, like and funny.
Okay. Did you guys?
Yeah, like that. So it makes me sound like bigger.